Welcome to Nice Ashes. I'm Nate.
And I'm Mike.
What we got
What are we
smoking
today? I beat you to it. We are smoking the Nub Double Maduro. This is the last in our Nub series.
And we last smoked the regular Maduro, so
Yes.
we are going to try and find out if this is doubly Maduro-y or not.
Yes.
Because I remember the Maduro was quite strong. And quite
yes, it
good.
Was. Quite strong and quite good. I do have to have a disclaimer on this episode. I have smoked this cigar before.
And I'm drinking from the booming metropolis Wadena, Minnesota, the Plebe Triple IPA with Citra, Eldorado, and Cashmere hops.
That sounds really good.
You know what it is. This is my first time having it, but it's quite tasty. And I think even though it's a very heavy beer, or, it's a 10%er, it seems to be pairing quite well with a double Maduro.
Okay. I'm drinking water.
That also pairs really great with everything.
Yes.
Because water is life, and we all need to drink more water. I know I do.
Yes, I did not get a lot of sleep last night, so I am drinking water because I'm very tired.
Yes. I did not get a lot of sleep last night either. But I have no restraint, so I'm fucking drinking more beer.
There we go. I have to wake up early tomorrow also, so. Hideous.
I have to wake up whenever my 2-year-old wakes up tomorrow, so. Which usually is around 7.
Sure. I'm sure I'll be up at 6. But, oh well.
Probably true.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, we are going into, as we're ending one phase, the Nub series, with this double Maduro, we are continuing our literary series. And we've previously talked about Slaughterhouse-Five, and I feel like there was another book we talked about that we read.
Animal Farm.
Animal Farm, that's right.
Yes.
I was trying all day to remember, because I'm like, I know this is the third book we're going to be talking about. But I blame it on lack of sleep, because that and, we're 30-plus episodes in now to Season 1, so it's difficult for me to remember everything.
Right.
But
I definitely do not remember all the cigars.
No, I know.
Some of them stick out more than others, obviously.
Well, yeah, and I feel like we should, maybe the last episode of Season 1, we should talk about our highlights from Season 1 before we transition to Season 2.
Yeah, we should do that, because there's a couple that stick out to me immediately.
Yeah.
But,
But that'll be the season finale. We can talk about that.
Sure. We have the GOAT, our dual favorite.
Yes.
That doesn't even need to be named by now. But, there were others as well.
There were others. And I think we mostly agreed on a fair chunk of them. Probably a majority.
I think so.
We have similar smoking preferences, so.
Yeah, slight variances, but.
Yeah, here and there.
Now, this start is very strong.
It's very, very strong.
Very strong.
I'm excited. Like, it's so strong, I'm excited.
I'm probably going to get a little enthusiastic.
I foretold that in the tea leaves.
Yes.
So, and
I saw today that they are now selling THC soda pop in the stores in Minnesota.
Yeah, they can sell THC anything now because the Republicans legalized it.
Yeah, which is awesome.
By not reading the bill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw it at a place, and the guy was like, "Yeah, you can drink this driving down the road." I was like, "What? That doesn't seem right."
You can drink all sorts of things driving down the road at least once, right?
Right. Yeah.
But all this is a long way of saying that we're going to be talking about Lord of the Flies. And I think the theme here is we're doing a lot of the high school required reading books. Not because that's where our reading levels are at, but because we haven't read them for so long.
It is, yeah. I read Lord of the Flies before.
Yeah, I mean, I read it in high school, and then I haven't thought of it. You know, I mean, like in passing, I've thought of it, but I mean, when we get into it, I'll tell you more of like the things I did or didn't remember. I mean, there's certain things that you remember about a book, and it's different for everybody. But even with Animal Farm, I remember we were talking about that, and we kind of remembered some of the main lines or the main premises, but some of the other stuff, like, you know, the crow and the cat and some of those other, like, kind of more minor characters, but that really flushed everything out. Like, those are kind of, like, lost to my memory.
Right. Yeah, I didn't remember Benjamin as being the best character. We're not talking about Animal Farm. We're talking about Lord of the Flies.
No, but, I mean, we're just kind of explaining why we're kind of going back to some of these, like, required high school readings.
Right. It wasn't required. I read Animal Farm, but I read Lord of the Flies on my own.
I guess it depends on your high school. But there are also these books. All three of the books that we've read so far have been off and on the banned book list.
Yes, and I like the books that are on the banned list for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. What I've heard said is if a book makes the banned book list, you better go out and read it because there's something in there they don't want you to read.
Right. And they don't ban things that are false.
Yes.
They don't censor falsehoods. They censor truth.
Yeah, none of the books with the naked, nipply men on the cover have been banned. We'll just put it that way.
Fabio is not banned from the library. My high school library, they actually had a poster of Fabio reading a book in the library.
Pretending to read a book?
I have no idea.
I don't know. I'm sure he's a great
Fabio
guy.
was like outside of him being a model, you know?
Yeah. I'm sure he's a lot smarter than Derek Zoolander.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I have no idea.
Well, where do you want to start with Lord of the Flies then?
Well, we can do an overview real quick.
All right.
And then we can get into some details.
Sounds good.
So the book starts out with two characters, Ralph and Piggy, and they find each other, and through the process of elimination, we find out that somehow they got to this island. They don't specify if it was a crash or if they were dropped off from an airplane.
No, they specify.
Was it a crash? I don't remember.
It was a crash because they talk about the scar, and that's where the plane, but they never go back to visit the plane wreckage. And the pilot is dead in the plane. And this is stuff I didn't remember. So I didn't remember it was like a World War III post-apocalyptic story.
I didn't either, but I caught it, and it was against the Reds.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, so that was some stuff that I didn't remember. But at the very beginning couple chapters, they talk a lot about the plane wreck and the scar. But they call it kind of the scar. They don't really call it the plane wreck. But that's where they crash landed. And I think, and we can talk a little bit more about this later, but I think that's part of the brilliance and kind of the frustration of this book is very much written from the perspective of one of the kids. And so a lot of the chapters are fairly disjointed, and they call things names that you or I or adults maybe wouldn't call them, but because they're kids. And so it's very thematic in the sense that it feels like you're there with the kids, but trying to remember the scar is the plane crash, and they call the vines and the prickers something else.
It was the tangly things or something.
Yeah,
like
when
that.
they run through the woods. So they've got like their own little like naming conventions for these things on the island.
Right. And and then they blow the conch,
Yep.
and they get all the boys together and they pick leaders and
Yeah, and Ralph gets picked just solely kind of well, so the Ralph character is very interesting to me, and we're going to delve into this in a little bit, but he's almost like delegated leader solely based on the fact that he found, or Piggy found and then gave to Ralph the conch, and he was the first to blow it.
Right. And he was the closest, he was the largest one, physically the largest one.
Yeah, before the choir boys showed up.
Before the choir boys showed up, yes. So, interesting.
If you're a Catholic priest, calm down. They're just normal choir boys. They're not Catholic choir boys.
I saw a great meme that I will send you later.
Okay, perfect.
Let's just say it has the Pope.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. Anyway, so yeah, they pick a leader, and immediately there's strife between the head choir boy,
Jack,
who's also a prefect. Yep. Jack Meridew.
Yep.
And things ensue from there. And they burn one of their kids alive and all sorts of mishaps throughout.
Just a good time had by all.
Great time was not had by all.
No, absolutely not. But, it's if you've ever done any kind of like leadership training or team building or team training, you've kind of got the storming, norming, and performing stages, right? Like at the start, everybody's kind of like vying or jockeying for their position. And then you kind of have like some calm times, and then you're finally actually like things are kind of clicking. But then what a lot of places don't tell you is that you can go back and forth between all those different stages. So, when they first build the conch and they elect Ralph as the leader, there's some storming because they're all kind of like they're unsure. They don't know how long they're going to be there. Jack kind of wanted it, but he's kind of okay with being second fiddle initially, and then he really dives deep into the role of the hunter, kind of the alpha male. And then everything's performing, but then, wouldn't you know it, alpha male Jack goes against Ralph's wishes to have the signal fire always going, and the ship, and they miss the ship, and then that's kind of the turning point where everything kind of really gets dark.
Yes, it is. Things get dark quickly. I actually considered the turning point when Jack decided to paint his face to hunt. Because they called it the mask.
Yes.
And then if you notice throughout, as more and more of the boys start painting their face, they're called savages and the masked one, and they stop getting their names.
Yeah.
Or be the savage who used to be called, whoever.
Yeah, the savage formerly known as Prince.
Basically, yes. And they, of course, become more and more and more savage. And they beat one of the boys to death. And they roll a rock over Piggy.
Yep. And, and then they start stealing from one another, and they basically Gitmo the twins, Jack and crew. But it's not, and here's the interesting thing is, for the first maybe 3/4 of the book, you think, oh, that Jack, he's the problem. But then you find out that it's Roger, and Roger's like the sadistic one.
Yep.
Part of Jack's crew, and he's the one that like tortured the kids, the twins, and stuff.
He's the one that killed Piggy too.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
It's just kind of it's an older book. So if you haven't read it, read it.
Yeah, it's a classic.
The
audiobook is great because William Golding reads it.
Oh, okay.
And he does an introduction and an exit outside of the book, explaining how he came up with the idea and why he wrote it, and then explaining afterwards the themes of the book.
Okay.
Which was like the best. It was super, super short.
Yeah, yeah. We can
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit too, because I did a little like after I read the book, I looked up some stuff about it, and I believe his premise was he wanted like there was another book that came out that was kind of kids surviving, but it was a lot more optimistic, and he wanted something a little more realistic. But then since his book was published, there were actually some kids that were stranded, and it was kind of the more optimistic outcome. So I think the jury's kind of out on like which version would actually take place in real life.
Well, it all depends on the length, because the kids were there had to have been a year. The
Yeah.
hair went from being, Ralph's hair went from being a half an inch short
Yep.
to being long enough to where he could tie it in a ponytail.
Yeah.
So that's some time.
Yeah, and you also have to think of the setting, because any of the boys in real life, since the book was published, didn't live through a nuclear war.
Right.
Right. And in this book, they're all fleeing from nuclear war.
They're all fleeing from a city that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. And I don't know.
Aware.
Yeah. And I don't know where they were going or where the safe haven was. But they were at the end, spoiler alert, rescued by the British Navy. And we'll talk about that when we get to it. But I really want to talk about Ralph a bit, because I feel like, and there's not, he never really goes back and gives a backstory on anybody other than Ralph. And so Ralph keeps like daydreaming about these ponies or horses. So to me, that means like he's from an affluent family.
Yes.
But
they all are, because they're all private school children.
Yeah. But he doesn't go...
Including Piggy, including Simon.
Yes, but he doesn't really go into the background of a lot of them. And so, like... But I feel like Ralph had some sort of mental condition.
You think so?
Well, the only reason I say is because he kept going back to the horses in his mind. And then there were several instances where Ralph was thinking, and he was like, there was something I needed to do, but the curtain pulled shut in my mind or something, and it was like, but it was something as simple as like remembering the signal fire. So I don't know if that was like stress or if that was like he had some sort of mental condition, you know what I mean? And so
I interpreted it as Ralph was slowly turning into a savage.
Okay, I mean, that could be.
By the end, Piggy and Simon were the only ones that never turned into savages.
Yeah.
And Ralph was the last remainder of that group, and he was slowly turning savage himself.
I mean, that makes sense, too.
Right, and Simon definitely had a mental issue. For sure.
No, he met the Lord of the Flies. I mean,
exactly.
That's not a mental
issue. But he was
issue.
Also the one that knew that there wasn't a monster either.
Or
he knew what the monster was.
Yeah.
Right.
But I just like some of the wording that the author used describing Ralph's kind of like mental processes led me to believe that maybe, I don't know what the right wording for it is, and I don't want to seem offensive or anything, but like that maybe there was some sort of thing, because like Ralph was kind of the ultimate reluctant hero, if you would call him a hero, but like definitely a reluctant leader. And he only ever did things at the urging of Piggy. And so
Piggy was the brains of the operation.
No, I know that. Like Piggy's the brains, but Piggy had like, social anxiety. So he would never like lead anybody. But
Piggy was lazy and he had asthma.
Yeah. But I feel that Ralph may have been from like the wealthiest of the families, and maybe people knew his family, but maybe he wasn't, let's just say, all there, and so he only kind of did things at the urging of Piggy.
Sure.
Because I don't like, I'm trying to remember, and I don't feel that Ralph ever kind of did anything on his own without input from Piggy, which is fine. And that doesn't mean that he's got like like some kind of mental thing going on. but some of the other wording kind of like led me to believe that maybe there was something else going on in Ralph's story,
Potentially, yeah.
But it could be the savage. He could be turning savage too. Like, I don't know. I mean,
well, I know that William Golding at the end said that whatever your takeaway from the book and whatever interpretation of events that you have, those are the ones that are true, because what you read into it is the only thing that actually matters.
Well, and that's I think as an author, as a creative person, like that's all you can say, because people are going to interpret what they want to interpret.
Right. Yep.
I just found it interesting, because I was trying to think, like Ralph, he doesn't want to be the leader, but he is, and like his go-to is like, I'm going to pull the conch, and that's going to like make everything good again. But he was kind of like, he was fixated on the fire, but then there were times where he was like forgetting about the fire. And that was when like the curtain was like closing, and I was like, man, I wish he would just like, I wish, William would go a little bit more in depth on that. Like, is it the stress of not going home, or is it and then just like the ponies, or going back to the horses, like, and he would kind of like flash back to enjoying the horses, and I'm like,
right.
I mean, I don't know.
I think that's part of the charm, though, is because a lot of it is interpretation, because a lot of it is they're not using the proper terms, right? The beast.
Well, no, yeah.
Well, the beast is more than one thing in the context of the story.
Oh, the beast is a ton of things.
Yeah, the beast is a ton of things. The beast is your fear of the dark. Your beast is Simon. Your beast is a guy that it was killed in a plane crash.
Yeah.
The beast is, the pig with the head on the stick, the Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
The beast is the evil within you. Really, that's what it is.
Well, yeah, of course. Or whatever you fear the most. That's the beast. It's a really, really neat book. I found myself getting frustrated at the writing style. Not because it's poorly written, because it's not. But it's frustrating because so much is open to interpretation. And so much is, it's a short book. It's not as short as Animal Farm, but it's a short book. And if you don't pay attention to the thing that the kids call the thing, you're going to forget what that thing is later. So
that's part of it. This is my opinion.
Yes.
It's written in a way that you purposefully do forget it, because the kids are forgetting.
No, and I agree with you
100%.
100%. And it's just like when you said, I don't know if they were parachuted in or crashed, and it's like, no, the scar, that's the plane crash.
Right.
And there's other things I'm sure I've forgotten, because I was going through I think they call them like the Tanglers.
The Tanglers, yep.
But they call all these things like different things. And so you're kind of like, okay, what did this supposed to mean? And I think maybe if you're younger and you read it, like, it makes more sense because it's things that you would call these things. And as an adult, you're like, that's not what anyone calls that.
Right. Yeah. So, the youngins and the bigs or whatever.
Yep.
But I think the youngins and the biggins.
It was great because they were all so excited at the beginning.
Oh, yes.
And they could, swim and take off their clothes and whatever. And, it was
then they started pooping where the fruit was, and then they started getting sick.
Yeah. And so it was a kind of a great, like, trial and error, which is kind of like, if you're not trained in wilderness survival, which a lot of people aren't, and that's not meant as a jab at anybody, because, we live in a modern society, and there's very few instances where that ever comes into being handy. And especially for kids, like, they don't know any better, but they trial and error and they figure it out, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't shit on our food, right. And then they were kind of like,
he explicitly said that none of the children had any blemishes marking their face.
Yeah. So they're all like
the oldest
pre-teen.
ones were preteens. The oldest of the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So.
The bigs.
And they were all boys, which was an important part of the story as well. No girls, only boys.
I can't imagine this novel with girls.
William Golding actually talked about that in the preface of the book too.
Oh, okay.
Yep. He said that there's 3 reasons why it was all boys. So, number 1, he was a boy and a father, and at some point a brother and a grandfather. So he can write about boys.
Yeah.
And he's never been a woman. Number 2,
he didn't want to write about sex. If he wanted.
Well, right, yeah. Not in his era. He didn't want to write about sex on the island. He didn't want that to be part of the story, so he didn't want to have girls. And then the other part was that...
that's very fair.
Right. And then in his opinion, that if there were girls, that they would probably... things would be different. That, things wouldn't have gotten quite as crazy due to the influence of the girls.
Yeah, possibly.
Possibly. I mean, that was his theory.
Yeah. I think it would depend on the percentage, like the breakdown, right? Like percentage of females to males, because if there are fewer females than males, then it would evolve. I think the de-evolution to savagery or barbarianism or whatever would have happened quicker.
Possibly.
Because they'd be competing for that. But
right.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. Like I'm not the author of the book, so I don't know.
Right.
But I guess like reading it and with how dark it got, I'm certainly thankful that he didn't include females in the book.
The darkness begins almost immediately, and it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows. And it started with the Litlands, and it eventually it consumed everybody. And the older boys didn't want to acknowledge the beast when it first reared its head, so to speak, and it just grew out of control.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, it's you're in a confined. I mean, you're on an island, but it's still like, if you think about it, you're in a confined space, and there's more little ones or little-uns than there are the bigs.
Yes.
And their concerns, as ridiculous as they sound on day 1, on day 301, they start sounding pretty goddamn legit, because you've heard them for 300 some days. Right. And you can't ignore it. It's just like, it's always being talked about, or, they're always crying at night. That was the whole thing. Like, all the little ones cry at night. They cry themselves to sleep. Not because there's some beast out there, but because they don't have their parents to comfort them and put them to bed with their routine, And none of the other boys were old enough to realize that there might have been a bedtime routine, And so had there been a female, they might have said, how do you prefer to go to sleep? Do you want a story? Do you want, but no, it's, it's like, hey, bedtime, go to bed. What do you want me to do?
Well, it wasn't even bedtime, go to bed. It was,
you do your own thing.
It had nothing to do with the little ones at all.
No,
I know. Had no contact.
And the one kid, and they never got his name, the one kid with the mark on his face, like he died like right away. Nobody knew how.
Burned alive.
Oh, yeah, burned alive.
He was burned alive.
But they didn't talk about it. They were just like, because later in the book, they're like, what happened to that kid with the mark on his face? And everybody's like, we don't know. Like they pretended like they blacked it out, Yeah.
Well, that's like they pretended like they didn't remember killing Simon, too.
Yeah.
Because he was a big, They knew he had a name.
Yep. His name is Robert Paulson.
Right. His name is Robert Paulson. Did you notice that Piggy was the only one who didn't have a real name?
Yes, I did, and it was hilarious, but also sad.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first thing he said to Ralph, and this is why I think Ralph had like a mental thing. Well, one of the reasons, like I've got a whole case built in my brain, in my interpretation, where Ralph had, I don't know if it was like autism or Asperger's but something, where he was off a bit. Like, I could understand everything that Jack did. I'm not saying I'm agreeing with everything that Jack did, But I can understand and relate to a lot of what Jack did. But Ralph, there's like a disconnect there somewhere, which I think it's great because he's as close to the protagonist of the story as you're going to get.
Pretty much, yeah.
You know, in a kind of like a free-for-all, survival, post-apocalyptic, living on an island thing.
Where the oldest boy is 12 years old.
Yes.
Potentially 12 years old.
But the thing is that Ralph and Piggy were friends, even though I don't know if Ralph ever kind of acknowledged that.
I don't think so.
You know,
well, Piggy was the outsider. Everybody knew he was the outsider.
Yeah.
So he was the whipping boy, even though he was the only one who ever had any ideas.
Yeah, any modicum of sense.
Yes, any idea to help them survive. Was all because of Piggy.
And the whole thing, like the whole catalyst into the complete and utter like devastation of the third act was trying to steal Piggy's remaining glasses lens because he was the only boy on the island that had glasses. And that was the only way they could start fire.
Right. Yeah. They didn't have any. They couldn't even rub two sticks together to start a fire, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's hard as shit. And I'm an Eagle Scout, and I know that's fucking hard as shit. I've never started a fire that way, and I pity the foo that has to try and do that.
I made a bow drill. I've done that, and I've done the sticks.
Okay.
Yeah. I did it in college, like on a sidewalk.
Okay, just for shits and giggles, or?
Yeah, we were wasted.
Or were you you were like protesting, like I'm gonna like.
We were just
fire right here.
We were just doing it for lulls, you know. Let's go and do this thing because we are poor and we have lots of time.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
My mentality is more like I'm just always going to be prepared enough that I don't have to do that. So I've got like waterproof matches everywhere.
Sure.
But going back to Lord of the Flies, when Ralph first meets Piggy, Piggy's trying to offer up his name, but he had mentioned that he has a nickname that he doesn't like to be called. And so, of course, Ralph is like, dude, you got to tell me that nickname. Because he brought it up. Like, don't bring it up if you don't want me to call you that. Like, tell me your name is like Clarence or like whatever, you know? So I'm not faulting Ralph because you don't ever lead like, hey, everybody calls me this, but I don't want to be called that. So I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you my name. Well, then it's too late already. Like, no, what's your nickname you hate? Like, I need to know that.
Right.
And that's just kind of like human nature, but like, and he's like, oh, it's Piggy. But then Ralph never has like the empathy. And I understand they're all like young kids, but he never says like, okay, well, what's your name? He laughs and laughs and laughs and calls him Piggy. You know, and I guess that's like, you know, I mean, that's kind of kids too, though, because,
kids are mean.
Well, but they don't mean to be mean necessarily. But even if like the oldest boy is 12, like I understand to some extent where it's like, ha ha ha, your nickname you absolutely fucking hate is Piggy, and that's what I'm going to call you. And I'm not even going to bother to ask you your full name. You know, like, I mean, that makes sense. And maybe, and I don't know, I mean, that's the cool, maybe the cool thing about the book is like, you can't necessarily side one way or the other with any one character because they're all flawed in their own ways, but everybody's flawed all the time, but more so when you're young.
Right. I never liked Jack. I always thought he was a prick.
Yeah, I thought Jack was
head of the choir, and he was head boy, which tells me that he was the teacher's pet, you know, and he acted like a entitled little prick, which is a character flaw of many young people, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, so like I related to Jack just in the sense that I could understand where he was coming from and what he was doing and why he was doing it because I've encountered many Jacks in my life.
Yes.
You know, but the Ralph character is one that's doesn't fit any necessarily like one person I've interacted with. I mean, there's been people that have had aspects of him, but that's why I mean, maybe that's just, my perspective, and that's why I interpret him as maybe having some kind of, I don't know, learning disability or mental thing,
It's very possible. I guess I didn't really look at it that way.
Yeah, and I don't know why I did. Like, I don't think I did when I first read it in high school.
Sure.
I don't remember that. I remember the flies all over the pig skull,
Right.
And I remember, shit getting dark real fast, but I didn't remember like the World War III stuff, the atomic bomb stuff, the plane crash. Like, I couldn't, for the life of me, before I read the book again, I couldn't remember how they got there on the island.
Well, it's only mentioned a few times.
Yeah, very, very one time briefly
did they mention that if they get rescued, they might actually be captured by the Reds.
Yeah.
One time it was mentioned. And they only really said one time that at least Piggy and the older boys were aware that the city they left was destroyed by an atomic bomb.
Yep.
So nobody knew where they were at.
Yeah, and and you could interpret all the Ralph and the horses and things. You could interpret that as, all that's gone, but that was his happy memory from that time. And it could, maybe it's not a mental thing. I don't know. Like, I don't know. But if William Golding says that my thing is right,
then you're right.
For me,
yeah.
Not for you, but for me, But I mean, that's cool for an author to come out and say that, like, however you interpret this is right. I mean, it saves you so much, like time and energy and effort trying to defend how you wrote it. Like, you take out of it what you need to take out of it. Like, whatever it means to you, it means to you.
Right.
Which it's going to anyway, regardless of what the author says,
Yep. I liked, like I say, a big theme was the rules are what keep people safe from the inner demons of everyone. Yeah. And we all have inner demons. It's all darkness, right?
Yeah.
On the inside.
Well, it's all action and reaction. And
yes.
The more reactions you have, kind of the darker everything gets in life. So on that level, like, it hits home really hard.
Yep. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it too. It's great. And I wanted, Animal Farm, I know you listened to it a couple times.
I listened to this one a couple times as well.
Okay, and this one is one, and I had read Slaughterhouse-Five multiple times, so I didn't feel the strong desire to reread it again after reading it again, if that makes sense to anybody. Yep. But this one, I was like, I should read this one again.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's good. It's entertaining because you can read it at just surface level. And then that's an entertaining kind of adventure story.
Yeah.
With a dark twist. But then there's layers of meaning, of course, hidden. Which isn't always the case in modern fiction. A lot of modern fiction is just the surface. There is no layering.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before. There's some really good, like, modern books. But a lot of the modern media that most people consume, be it like a TV show or a movie, like, the writing is not to the same level that it should be. But
right.
That's not what we're talking about. But and I think we talked about it earlier in the episode where the kids call things whatever kids would call things, and so sometimes it's very difficult for an adult reader. And I know the author was an adult when he wrote it, but to remember what the kids call certain things, and they kind of get lost in the meaning. But like you said, it's kind of the point, is they've been there for so long that whatever meaning they prescribed or ascribed to this word at the beginning has kind of like morphed and mutated and become something bigger than the actual thing. Just like the parachutist who died, and the wind was lifting him up, and Simon cut him free. But everybody thought it was a monster, the beast, and But it didn't matter. Even if Simon would have told Ralph and Piggy, Piggy would have understood. I don't know if Ralph would have, but Piggy would have understood. But I don't think Ralph would have been able to convince anybody else that it wasn't a monster.
I don't think so. I don't think that Piggy, I found this aspect interesting. Piggy saying it made it less likely to happen in many instances.
Yes.
Because everybody hated Piggy, other than Ralph and Simon and the twins.
Yeah.
That group, they didn't hate Piggy.
Even though he had like the best ideas, the best like thoughts and inputs.
Right. Him and Simon.
But it only mattered when Ralph vocalized it.
Yep.
But if Piggy couldn't get Ralph to get on board with that thing, because there are certain instances where Ralph was like, "You're just being stupid, Piggy."
Yeah, like the sundial to keep track of time.
Yeah.
What good would that do us? A lot of good, probably.
Yeah, we've been here for 1,000 years now.
Right. Probably a lot of good. I don't know how to say that.
Who knows? Who knows?
But they're little boys, too, so everything, it's like, well, they should have done this, they should have done that.
Well, yeah.
Why didn't they go back to the plane and scavenge there?
Yeah, they probably could have got the radio working.
Possibly. They could have at least taken the gun. I'm sure the pilot had a gun.
Yeah, you would have thought. But then that would have introduced a whole other thing, because it would be Controver's gun.
Right.
And now, but it ended up being like Controver's, like, boulder flying through the air. But.
Yep. I really found it interesting they were going around rolling rocks and doing little, like, playing kiddie stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with,
and being destructive.
Super mortal repercussions, I guess.
Right. FYI, I'm over halfway done.
Oh, yeah. I've got like an inch and a half left.
Yeah, I'm about there, too. This is very good.
It's really good. I like it.
It's very good. Yeah. It's dark, very consistent, and dark.
Did we mention it's dark?
It's dark. Very dark. Dark.
I don't know if it's twice as dark as the Maduro, but I feel it is darker to some extent.
It's good.
I quite like this one.
I smoked this one a couple weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it. I couldn't resist.
Well, I can't blame you. It's good.
Yeah, it's very good. So I bought the 50th anniversary hard copy of Lord of the Flies when I was in college because I enjoyed it that much. And I like adventure stories. I'm a big fan of Robinson Crusoe as well.
Okay.
I like that sort of. It's fun, it's just fun.
Yeah. Have you ever read Deathwatch?
Deathwatch? No.
It's let me look it up real quick. It's a book my brother and I read. I don't know where I got it or how I got it, but it's this crazy book about being in the desert and having somebody hunt you.
Oh.
But it's really short. It's like a really short book, but it's like it's really intense. I don't think it's the same. I don't know, like I read it maybe twice, but I don't think it's the same like intensity level as Animal Farm or Lord of the Flies. But it's one of like our favorite books, just as like a little like what were the little like the book fairs in school, remember?
Scholastic?
Yeah. I guess it's like one of those little books that you got. And it was like, oh, I don't know,
Like Hatchet?
Yeah,
Hatchet.
I've read Hatchet.
Is Hatchet the one where he committed suicide at the end?
I don't remember because that's another one like Hatchet and like Red Badge of Courage and whatnot. But I remember reading, what was it? It was like Julie's Wolf Pack or Julie of the Wolves or something. Like there was like two or three books in that series, and they were all pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, some like Native American woman and wolves. Like I don't know. But I think like Deathwatch is written by Rob White from 1973. But it's like a hunting trip, and then one of them like decides to hunt the other one.
Interesting.
But it's like it's a young adult novel, but it like I remember it being fairly graphic. Not necessarily in like gore, but like there's a scene in the book where he's like stuck in this cave in the desert trying to hide from this like murderous madman with a high-powered scope and rifle and everything. And he's like drinking like bird shit water out of like a puddle or something. So it's maybe more like exploitive than it is, like actual literature. But I remember it having an impact on us as kids.
Sure.
It's kind of like it's in the same vein as Lord of the Flies, because it's not really, I mean, a little bit it's like man versus nature in Lord of the Flies, because the kids are trying to build like these shelters that constantly leak. And Jack is like, I don't give a shit about those. I want to kill a pig. And they become almost ritualistic about killing the pig, because they have this chant that they do anytime they try and kill something, whether it's a pig
cut
or
its
a man.
Throat, spill its blood.
Yes. But this Deathwatch book is also very like it's man versus man, and I would classify Lord of the Flies more man versus man than man versus nature.
Oh, there's no man versus nature element really.
Well, a little
because
bit
the island
with the
has
shelters,
a ton of fruit on it.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a little bit like it kind of sets itself up initially as like man versus nature, but it's very, very, very firmly a man versus man.
Yes. Yeah, it's actually a very pleasant island. Overall, no snakes, no spiders.
Yep.
No animals that are dangerous.
Well, and the pigs, they're not wild boars that come and like try and stick you, because like some of the southern boars, like what? It was Old Yeller, like the Old Yeller even like went after a boar or something and got like rabies from the boar, right?
I don't remember.
No, but like like some of those wild boars and wild pigs and things are like mean and nasty, and they come at you.
Wild boars are dangerous in real life. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like this island wasn't that. Like the boars weren't like hunting the kids.
No,
they're just trying to kill these pigs. They're just pigs. They're not boars. So, in a book that you would think by reading like the back flap or whatever, you would think, oh yeah, man versus nature. But it's not,
Right. No, it's very much about the darkness. I interpret it as the darkness in the human soul. And what happens when the constraints of society leave and that darkness is allowed to grow.
Yeah, and even in the book, they talked a couple times about not having parents there to tell you what to do, kind of.
Right. Yeah, as the rules of society get farther and farther away into the past, the more savage they become towards each other.
Yeah, and the rules of society didn't really mean jack shit on the island.
No, nobody was there to enforce it.
Well, even if you enforce it, like, what's the point? I mean, you're on this fucking island.
Right.
Like, the island doesn't conform to whatever societal structure you want to impose on the world. Like, the island's just the island.
Yep, the island's the island. There's one mountain that you can apparently easily climb.
Yeah.
Because they all climbed it easily in a couple minutes. So it's not even a big island. You know what I mean? You can't hide on it.
No, yeah. Like the least accessible part of the island was Jack's little fort that he built.
Yes.
Because like the least hospitable part of the island, he chose that for his tribe because it was easily defendable.
Easily defendable. Yep, that was exactly what it was too.
But it was hard to get to. But once you got there and people let you in, it was fine. But, like that's where Piggy died and where Ralph was trying to get back in and get to the twins. But then he had to hide,
Hide in a thicket.
Yeah, that was some intense shit.
It was very intense. It definitely grew into a pressure. It was just one angle,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely I understand why they banned it. Not that I agree with banning books, because I don't. But I can see why it was banned.
I understand why, too. I don't think you should ban things.
No.
But
and the banning lists aren't really banned. They're just banned from schools.
Yeah, from public schools. You can still get them. They're not illegal, But it kind of makes me wonder because you've got, and I'm not saying this is right, and I'm not saying I agree with it, but movies have ratings. Albums, they don't really have ratings, but they have the parental advisory sticker, or they don't. You know, books, they don't have anything. You could pick up a book, and it could be like the sickest shit you've ever read in your life, and it'd be right next to the Bible. That's some of the sickest shit you'd ever read in your life too. But you know what I mean? Like,
I picked up a short story book from the dollar store when I was in middle school or high school.
Okay.
And it had some of the most violent stories in it I've ever read. And it was just at the dollar store in the dollar store bin,
Yeah.
And it looked interesting from the back. And it was like medieval torture type shit, you know what I mean? Short stories.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't believe they had that at the dollar store.
Yeah.
Of course, the Bible is pretty violent in parts as well.
And, most of it.
A significant portion of it, yeah. For those who haven't read it.
Most Christians.
Yeah, spoiler alert, there's violent parts of the Bible.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, your God is a vengeful God.
Yeah, yes. Multiple genocides are committed.
Yes. But it's okay because he loves you.
Yes, he loves you.
But it is interesting to me that the other media, like television shows and movies and music albums, have a rating system, or at least advisories, and books don't.
No, not unless they're labeled pornographic.
Well, yeah, for sure that, but if you're in middle school, you could go and buy a romance novel from a thrift store or from Barnes and Noble. Nobody would question that.
Probably not. I've never read a romance novel.
Well, me either, because they're dumb and stupid.
I'm guessing that they're graphic in parts.
That's the whole point. Is I don't think they're graphic. They do a lot of innuendo.
Ah, I see. It's not explicit.
But that's what I mean. Is nobody will ban a book full of innuendo that anybody older than 8 could understand what they're talking about. But they'll ban Lord of the Flies.
Oh yeah, Lord of the Flies is potentially controversial in the political sense.
Yeah.
Fahrenheit 451 was banned, which is hilarious.
There was a, and that's one I'd love to reread again too. But there was a post online where the guy was like, "Oh, the new anniversary edition of Fahrenheit 451 came with a match, and the spine had a striker panel on it. Like, what the fuck?" And the next comment was, "Have you read the book?"
Right. No. Yeah. Have you read the book? Exactly. I find it interesting that we are reading a lot of dystopian. You and I are reading a lot of dystopian style novels.
I
I
don't
read
find that
dystopian
weird.
novels a lot as a rule, and they're mostly anti-communist
Yeah.
dystopian novels. And I find that in many ways we are living in a dystopian future, but it wasn't the communists who won. By the way, I am officially done with my cigar. I
Oh,
just
me,
put it down.
me too. I put mine down a couple minutes ago.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was still smoking it right down to the as far as I could get it. It was
Yeah, me
very good.
too. I smoked mine way down.
Yeah, dark, high in nicotine. I can feel it.
Yep, everything I'd want in a double Maduro.
Everything that I would want. Very good. 2 thumbs up.
Yes, and so let's try and think. Is this better than the regular Maduro?
I would say it's better than the regular Maduro. Maybe not better than the KNF. I like the KNF a lot.
Ooh, the KNF was really good.
The KNF was very good.
And I think the takeaway is this double Maduro did not get sour at the end like most of the other nubs did.
No, it was good the whole way through.
Yes.
So I can definitely recommend to anyone.
Yes, the double Maduro nub is Nice Ashes approved.
For what it's worth.
Yes.
Which is less than the time it took to say. So, have a good week.
We'll catch you next time for the Dark Shark.